Hey, recording in progress. Okay, we got down to there, B part on number 11, the length of sermon. Things to remember about the time and length of a sermon. Number one, today people hear more sermons than they did in the 1800s and early 1900s. It used to be, they would go to a meeting, and sometimes those meetings would last anywhere from an hour to two. And they would have, back then when they were dealing with the denominational doctrine, like we'll just say, for instance, premillennialism. Brother Foy Wallace, he'd speak for 3 hours. And I had Brother Dewey Medlin, who was from up here in North Georgia. He's passed away now. He and his wife both. But he was a good friend of mine. He held meetings just about every place I'd been. And he said one time he went to hear and heard Foy Wallace speak, and he was speaking. He says he just got into it, and he says he looked down there and he thought it'd been about 30 minutes. It had been an hour and 45 minutes. He said that's how interesting it was what he was saying,
Yes.
And so, and others the same way. I mean, couldn't you imagine going to listening? I mean, I've listened to like Brother Nichols and Brother Guy in Woods, on tape, and I've heard a number of lectureships that I've heard. And so there was, I was trying to think of this fellow's name, that was just, he was just something else. And, and you'd sit there and listen and you'd say, well, man, that was, whoa, look at your watch, he'd gone overtime. And so, but back then, they had long sermons, okay? But today, we have Bible study. Back then, most likely, the only Bible study they had was probably during the week, unless they had it at night in their homes. And so we have Bible study on Sunday morning, then we have worship on Sunday morning, worship on Sunday night, we have Bible study on Wednesday. So, our day and time, our life is geared at a faster speed. We compare football games to 30-minute sermons, if you stop sometimes and look, a football game is what? An hour, right? 15, let's see, how many minutes is a quarter? 15?
You score 15-minute quarters.
Yeah, that's just an hour, but it's 3 hours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably going to be more than that if we don't watch it out. But the thing of it is, I mean, we're just geared. And there are times when I watch some things on TV, and if they don't have a break, time will go by just so fast. And you're thinking, they just had a break 10 minutes ago, and you got so interested, you look down and look, and it's been about 20, 25 minutes. So life is just geared. Not only that, habitually, long sermons have at least 3 pitfalls. Now, before I put the 3 pitfalls up there, we need to make sure we understand there will be long sermons. In other words, if like the congregation down in South Georgia there wanted me to come and speak on the Holy Spirit, we spoke for 45 minutes, had a 10-minute break. Speak 45 minutes, have a 10-minute break. So, well, that was a long sermon, but they got up, and we just had one person to leave during the whole thing. But it was a special occasion because they're having problems down there on the Holy Spirit, and they wanted me to come down there and preach on that. So that's what I did. So there will be a time where you're going to have long sermons, and because you're dealing with something else, especially you have elders, and they say, "Look, we want you to deal with this." And well, it's going to take more than 30 minutes. Well, we don't care. We want you to deal with it. Well, you get up and deal with it. But a long sermon will wear people down. I mean, I was at Brother Martin's funeral. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. Well, I'll be honest with you. I was sitting there, and I was paying no attention to the little clock. But I looked down at my watch, and that's how interesting I was listening to what was being said about it and everything. It was 2 hours. It didn't seem like it was 2 hours to me, but it was 2 hours that they had, and then they had 40 more minutes. And then it was interesting there because it was the family that got up and talked about their grandfather. So it was interesting, but it does wear people down, they will hurt attendance if you preach too long all the time. Say, for instance, we tell somebody, we invite them to come, and they come. We say we have Bible study at 10, we have worship at 11, we're usually through about 12. And well, it'll hurt attendance if it's a habitual thing. But if it's just an occasional thing that takes place, habitually, long sermons damage the good the speaker might do. And especially if they keep going over the same thing. If they're giving you, if they're making arguments or giving you, things to think about, then that's kind of different because you're holding their attention. And they say the attention span is something like 30 to 40 minutes. Now, I use PowerPoint, and by using PowerPoint, not only are you hearing it, not only do you have an outline that I give out, but plus you're seeing it. And so you ought to remember more. Only bad thing about that is you do a PowerPoint sermon, don't wait a year and come back and do the same thing because they'll remember it. But I love to do the PowerPoint because people will listen. Also, we draw two conclusions about this pitfall. We draw two conclusions about it. Number one, be careful of this danger your first days of preaching. I mean, when you first start preaching, and when we first started preaching, basically I preached about 30 minutes. I think my first sermon was about 20, and then I added things to things, and then when I went to school and I went and preached, it was about 30 minutes. And so that's basically what they taught us there. The same thing is that you spend about anywhere from 25, 30 minutes. They said stand up, speak up, and then shut up and sit down. What they told us there. So be careful. Your materials will accumulate and your ability will increase. And that's the thing. A lot of times, in my case, I have an outline, and then and making a point, and then maybe say, for instance, you got your outline, and that here comes some people you've been trying to get to come, and therefore maybe you're talking about you're going to mention the authority of the Bible. Then all of a sudden, because they're sitting back there now, they're listening, and therefore you can bring out other passages. That's what you're going to do. You're not going to preach at them, but you're going to give them the information that you think they need so you can help teach them the gospel of Christ. Okay, fads. Now, sometimes a preacher becomes obsessed with some fad, and they makes. Bobby, you're going to have to start reading these things before you print them and put them on there. Make a hobby of it, or he may pick up some practice that is not necessarily a fad, but he'll make it a fad out of it. The other day I preached my sermon, or last Wednesday night I was teaching my Bible class, and Gatewood called me at the end of it. He says, "What is this that of?" He said, "You said that more times than I ever heard." I said, well, what I was trying to do was to talk about premillennialism, Amos, because we were talking about David being in his sepulcher and everything, and but I used to have a bad habit with that. And Linda says, well, I noticed that too. So when I got home, she told me too. She noticed that. So but I don't try to make that a fad. You'll find me. I'll probably put on my notes for tomorrow night. Don't say that is. Yeah, but some people do that. I mean, they pick up something and they'll say, we catch Corey every once in a while. He says, what was it? At the end of the day. At the end of the day. He'd say that a lot, but then all of a sudden he doesn't do it. The next thing you know, he'll do it. At the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference. Or at the end of the day, you got, good point. And but sometimes we pick those things up. There is a case. Wrong one, Bobby. There is the case of catchy phrases. They may be true and proper, or they may not be true and they may not be proper. We repeat them because they sound attractive. There may some truth be in them, however, they may become untrue and damaging in their application. And so some people do that. An example of that is the denominational saying, as goes the Sunday school, so goes the church. For example, could you not at least with some reasonableness say, as goes the eldership, so goes the church, or as goes the pulpit, so goes the church, as goes the home, so goes the church, you know. But now, I mean, we can stop right now, and we know that because of what's happened in the homes, that it's affecting our country. What's happened even in that of some of the religious schools and even some of our own. We have to be honest about it, you know, when we stop for a moment and look at it, because truly that statement may be, you know, as goes our colleges, so goes our pulpit, so goes the congregation. So we have to make sure, you know, in reference to that, some preachers goes to denominational church, denomination universities or colleges or cemeteries. I mean seminary. And I went there, but I didn't let it bother me. I knew what the truth was, and so you know, and I expressed the truth in my papers and the studies that I done and stuff I hand in. I wasn't going to compromise anything, you know, there. And so that's what we have to do when we're in the pulpit. So another example of a catchy phrase, if I can get my mouse over there, of these catchy phrases is this one, or some variation of it. A man does not have to get seasick to do missionary work. Now, we may not have heard that, but you have some people who don't think we ought to be doing missionary work. And my opinion is that evangelism starts when you walk out the front door of the church building, to me, because you're going to meet people that are lost. No matter where you go, you're going to meet people that are lost. But that doesn't mean that, you know, just because we can go outside and find people doesn't mean that we can't support someone who wants to go overseas and do missionary work where the gospel is not being preached. Because we're going to look at some things about the Apostle Paul in a few moments if I get over there, and we're going to have to get through. Here, some are against sending a preacher to do missionary work in a foreign country. But what does Matthew 28, Mark 16, Luke 24 teach? It actually teaches that go you into all the world. That's what he told the 12 apostles. Because all the 12 apostles, we'll say that's AD 30, and most likely every one of them was dead by AD 70 except for John and maybe Peter. Now, had they gone out into all the world? The gospel had gone, but did those 12 men go? No, see. And so evangelism to me starts when you walk out the front door, but that doesn't take away from our supporting that of missionary work. It's just like a Fairmount. I mean, Fairmount's here in Georgia, but it's a mission field. And it's a hard mission field too, because we've done a lot of things up there, knocking on doors and sending out house to house, heart to heart, newspaper article and things of that sort. And, you know, 1 or 2 Bible studies all we ever get, and they don't ever finish. So it's a hard area, but the brethren are still a meeting, so they don't let that bother them. And then we have this other fad that's come up, and I put it this way because this is the way it's in the book, sex education. The very nature of this subject makes it dangerous as a propriety, and then also more in the realm of family responsibility and more out of place in teaching to a mixed class. Now, here at Cartersville, I remember that I taught a class to the young men, and Gene Chase taught a class to the young woman. We split them up and taught them about some things. But especially, well, it didn't come up. Especially out of bounds for young preachers, and the older preachers should take care at that point. You know, to sit down and talk, because here they are, and if they're wanting information, and so we have to give them information. I remember one of our teenage girls, somewhere along the line, that she had heard about the different things in reference to sexual relationship, and she talked about certain sexual relationship, even though it was sexual, but it wasn't a sin. You know, I was trying to think of what they called it, but I can't think of the name right now. Oh well, but it is dangerous, and so we need to make sure that we keep our eye on that. In the colleges, they're teach on sex education. The world has gone to the extreme. Put that down there, because that's true. You look at today, you know, we got doctors don't know where they don't know who can have a baby, whether it be male or female or both. You know, if you listened to the news yesterday, a day before yesterday, and transgender and all that kind of stuff. And so we have to make sure that we understand some of what's going on. And yet, when we talk about the sexual relationship, where it's from a sermon, Paul talks about the sexual relationship in 1 Corinthians 7. So if you ever preach expositorily, then that's what you have to do. But we find that it's like we teach in our class for our young people. There's one man for one woman for life. I haven't heard them say that lately, but that's what they used to say. Okay, so you need to make sure you keep your eye on that type of a pitfall, a special pitfall, because of what's being taught not only in our colleges and other places on sex education. So we have to really try to watch that. Any question or comment on that? Okay, number 13. Maybe we should have made it number 14, skip 13. Fatal disappointment over defeat of a cherished project. I mean, make the point, then we'll go into this. What worked at congregation A when you preached there may not work at congregation B when you move there. We have people go and say, well, this is what we did. Well, that may all be good and well. That's what you did, but just stop for a moment and think, this is what we did. They're talking about they were in a city congregation and you're sitting out in the middle of nowhere. In other words, everywhere you go, if you're going to go somewhere, we used to have fellowship. We go out, we go down to some of them cafe, them places, they disappeared already. We'll go down to Longhorns and places like that. Well, how far is the Longhorn from here? From there, where you were. So things like that, you have to make sure that about getting together. But fellowship, I'm telling you, fellowship. A study of that of fellowship. When we go together, when we go to worship, we go there for the point of fellowship. We're fellowshipping with God, but we're fellowshipping with one another. And I think Brother Heron made a good point Sunday night in reference to our snack and yak things that we have here. That it's good to come because of the fellowship that you're getting, whether you eat or not. It's because some people don't eat that late at night, and so but it's the fellowship you have. And you can look at the young people in reference to that, and you can see the type of fellowship they have. They bring games and everything else, or they're running all over the place, doing something, at times. But here's the idea about this. What often happens is a preacher becomes so interested in one project that he values the entire whole of his work by that alone. One of the fellows I went to school with made the point, and he's a great personal worker. And the reason why he's a great personal worker is because when he obeyed the gospel, the preacher that was there, that's what he did. He mentioned, about personal work, and but it wasn't a hobby. He preached the sermons on everything that you preach on, but he would incorporate at times, hey, when they started this project of what the things that they would do, and so. You get a project and it goes to win the congregation to it, and it may fall starting with the elders. The elder says, no, we're not going to do that. They may ask you, like with me, the elders asked me when Corey came, asked me, says, are you still teaching the Fishers of Men program? I said, yeah, when somebody wants it, I would go and do it, teach the program. And he said, well, we may want you to do that. Well, they turned around and did the other one, the open Bible thing, Well, it didn't bother me, that do it, because it's another way of doing it. And I use that I would use the Fishers of Man, then I would use the open Bible study, and then I would use the film strip. I did everything I can, that what people wanted to see. If they had younger children, probably the film strips, they're not CDs now, would be the best thing to do. And so, but the elders may be against some things. When it fails, many times the preacher is ready to leave. He started this, and therefore it's not going. It just simply people don't want to work, and therefore I'm going to leave. Well, there may be another way of doing some things. And so there are 5 pitfalls in the area of projects. Number 1, the preacher may value that project too highly, though obviously it will be hard to convince him of that fact. And people would ask me in reference to like the personal work thing. I thought the Fishers of Men was a great thing, But if I were to be asked by the elders to teach, how to use the film strips or the CDs, or how to use Open Bible, I can do that. I'm not going to sell myself short. Say, no. Well, fishers of men is the best thing to do. And no, I think there's all different ways of doing it. Matter of fact, one good way for us to do it is to carry a Bible with us. And when somebody asks us a question, when we visit with them, they ask a question, open up the Bible. Maybe we just sit there and have open Bible study. And there are things that we have where you can mark your Bible. And you mark your Bible, and it carries you to the next thing. I like the conversions about some passages on faith, repentance, confession, and baptism, and about the church and so forth like that. You can make a thing and just study that way. So it may be hard to convince him of that he's put too much on the program that he wants. So when it fails, let's see here. The preacher can get out of humor and show it. The preacher can be important. If he fails, he could wait and try again. And so instead of being ready to leave, or as we say, the preacher can so antagonize others as to lose his influence over them. Matthew 5, verse 13, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. So you find that you would want to do that. You don't want to lose your influence. I would grant that if all of us, with us three, were going to do some personal work, and we met somebody, and you say, well, I think I'm going to use this. Well, I would use fishers of men, but you may say, well, I'm going to use Open Bible Study, and another may say, well, I'm going to use those old the gospel service film strips or CDs. Or maybe on something else now. You may even get them on TV. I don't know. On streaming. There you go. And so, but the thing of it is, is we're doing the Lord's work. And, and if someone were to come to me, so how can I use those old film strips and, that's been updated and everything? Well, I have a thing that Brother Jerry Jenkins used, and he baptized all kinds of people, taught all kinds of people, and they stayed faithful. And I have workbooks that he made himself for that. And that's what a lot of preachers do. They'll start off with fishers of men or something like that, and some of them just go off and they use this and use this and use this. Brother Bobby Wood, he uses fishers of men, but he doesn't. He does like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he skips 6, goes 7, because 6 talks about baptism, 7 talks about the church. Why do you want to baptize somebody that don't know anything about the church? Yeah. And so he skips over that way. When you are unhappy, then you cannot do your work well. And it's like Brother Curry always told us, don't never make a decision on a blue day. And you just don't do that. If it's been a hard day, if it's even at this time, the thing to be is find out if the elders say no, or if it's just men, if they say no, then you could go to them and says, we need to have a meeting, and just ask them, says, what can we do? What program can we do? Now, we're going to talk about programs of work, because a lot of places that I went, they've never had a program of work. And you had to sit down and write one. And what I had to do is I wrote big congregations and said, can you send me a copy of your program of work? They said, well, why? And I said, because we wanted to start a program of work. We want something to do. And so, and that's what we did. We used the things that they had and accommodated, or used what we could use with a group of people we had. If the preacher gets unhappy and disappointed, he must not go as far as to say, if they do not play my way, I will take my bat and ball and go home. You just simply don't do that, because I know we probably would, I wouldn't say probably, we would feel defeated, but there's ways of getting around this one, I think, and that's when they say, well, what are we going to do? Or do you have any suggestions for us to do? What do you think will work, since you've lived here all your life? I've only lived here for a year. What do you think will work? Get them involved in it. Let's see what we can do. And any question or comment? All right. Number 14, your length of stay at a place. A lot of preachers, when they find a place, they'll make the point, I'm never going to leave. And then they do, you know. When I moved back to Carsville, which is mine and Linda's home, my wife told me, says, you move me back to Carsville, we're never moving again. And so we moved into the preacher's home, then we moved over here. That's the only move we made since 1990. But longevity in preaching is really a good thing, you know, because people will hear, if they hear about a preacher, or if this preacher is maybe goes to lectureships or stuff like, speaks on lectureships, holds meetings or whatever, and they have come to know the preacher, and you got the preacher's name on let's say, for instance, in the Gospel Journal or Gospel Advocate or whatever it may be that is advertised through our brotherhood, when they get ready to move, say, for instance, well, I'm going to be working in Marietta, and you know, and so there's a congregation in Cartersville. But if I moved to Marietta, I wouldn't have to drive. But the traffic is so bad, you know, things like that. And so we've had people move here, and because of you know, some of them I knew beforehand, or people knew me. And they told us, Bobby Gayton preaches up there. And so that's what you do, you know. Okay, number 14, your length of stay at a place. I knew a preacher, he moved every 2 years. And like I said before, if I'd been an elder in a place like that, I wouldn't have hired him. I looked at his resume and said, why are you leaving every 2 years? Don't you have more sermons in 2 years? Don't you have more sermons than 100? It's going to be 52 times 2 be 208. Don't you have more than 208 sermons that you can read? You know, but I think the longer you stay, the better it is. I mean, I've been fortunate. Every place I've been, I left on my own. I wasn't fired, wasn't told to leave. They may have come and were going to do it, but I left before they told me, I guess. But I went back to every place but one place and held meetings. So, okay. There are, hit the wrong button. There are too many factors involved in this problem to permit an ironclad rule for all places, or even for you to plan to stay at any one place a definite number of years. Now, a lot of times a preacher will go to a preacher may go to school of preaching, or may take courses like through school of preaching, and maybe with no intent of preaching full time. I wasn't going to preach full time. I moved back to Carsville and stayed about 3 months and left. And stayed gone until 1990. But that's what I wanted to do. After I got out of school and everything, and I tried working again and preaching on the radio and doing personal evangelism. That's just not all I wanted to do. I wanted to preach. But the thing of it is that you know, if you're doing a good work, you stay there. If there's a problem and you can't get the problem solved, you know, you can preach on it and you can teach on it. And if you've done all that you can do, and you know, they say we're not going to change, then you know, I guess it's time to move. And so, but I have put something in here, and I think it's here, yeah. And I want to go away from this because I want you to look. I'm just going to read down through here on the thing if you want to. And Jason, you're not responsible for a test or anything on that, on this. I thought it was interesting because of what Paul did. And when we started out with the point of the life and work of a preacher / evangelist. Now, Paul was a preacher, and he stayed at places for 18 months to probably 3 years, but he was an evangelist. And the same would be with Timothy. He's called an evangelist when Paul writes to him, but he was the preacher at Ephesus. I don't know how long he stayed there, but this is something that you can use if you want to use it when you're talking about, you know, say you're going to preach a sermon on, let's just say, for instance, on the book of Galatians. Here's some information before it, number 1 here, that would help you. But it's just something that, to me, it's a chronology of Paul's life in some ways. But the period from the conversion of Paul until the first trip to Jerusalem, Acts 9 through 12, Paul was converted on the road of Damascus. He entered Damascus and stayed there for an unknown amount of time, Acts 9:19, and it is said 37 to 39 AD, Arabia. And Saul's retirement, Galatians 1:17 and 18, the AD dates varied due to many not putting them in chronology. And so someplace says that this took place in September of 39 AD. Now, sometimes the Bible gives us hints because it talks about the Passover. And like in the Gospel of John, he mentions 3 Passovers. So we know it covered 3 Passovers in reference to that of his book. And so he goes to Jerusalem. His first visit there is, like I said, 39 AD. Paul went to Arabia for an unspecified period and returned to Damascus, Galatians 1:17. The whole period from his conversion until the second visit to Jerusalem. After the 15 days at Jerusalem, Paul was sent away to avoid capture and sailed from Caesarea to the regions of Syria and Cilicia, Acts 9:30, Galatians 1:21, 40 AD. Okay, that's the time. So that's about a year. After a period ranging from 8 to 14 years, Paul traveled to Antioch with Barnabas and stayed for 1 year. Acts 11:25, Galatians 1:21 through chapter 2 and verse 1. And as I see below, you'll see something else. That was 45 to 48. So we find there that there was a period there that we don't have a lot of what Paul was doing, but it was a period ranging from 8 to 14 years. Then he traveled, too quick. Then he traveled to Jerusalem from Antioch, staying for a short time. This was in connection with the collection taken up for Antioch because of Agabus's vision, Acts chapter 11, Galatians 2 and 1. Then he returned to Antioch. Third, the period from the second until the third visit to Jerusalem. After the relief visit, the second visit to Jerusalem, Paul returned to Antioch very soon after the first missionary journey began, March 44 AD, in Jerusalem. Paul's first missionary journey from Antioch to Perga to Cyprus to Antioch in Pisidia to Iconium to Lystra to Derbe and back to Antioch in Syria, early 51 to 53 AD. So you're looking at, if you say 51 to 52 to 52, 53, then you're talking about 2 years, 2 years plus, because we don't know when he started, what month he started. But he traveled from Antioch to Seleucia, then to Cyprus. Then he went to Pamphylia, which lies to the north of Cyprus in modern day Turkey. And from there, he went to Galatia as far as the city of Derbe. Then he went back through the same cities in the opposite direction. Finally, he sailed from Antioch of Pisidia to Antioch of Syria. Then this entire journey apparently lasted 6 to 9 months, concluded before the storms of winter would have stopped ship travel in that of the Mediterranean. Now, stop and ask yourself a question. Now, was he a preacher or was he an evangelist? He was traveling along that, though. That's what we look at an evangelist, traveling, one who travels all the time. But yet the Bible points out to us that he was preaching the gospel as he was going to these different places. The period from the third trip to Jerusalem Council, Acts 15, until the last trip, Paul traveled from Antioch to Jerusalem for the council, then back to Antioch. At that time, they began the second missionary journey, Acts 15 to 17. Now, your Bible may give you the precise verses on those. Paul journeyed from Antioch to Syria to Cilicia, and this time using the overland route to Turkey. They visited Derbe and Lystra, then passed through Phrygia and Galatia. He arrived at Troas, where he set for Macedonia. Upon arrival, he went to Philippi, then to Samothrace, Neapolis, Amphipolis, Thessalonica, Berea, Athens, and finally to Corinth, where he stayed 1.5 years, 18 months. After the Macedonian and Greek ministry, he traveled to Ephesus, Caesarea, and back to Antioch in Syria. In Paul's third missionary journey, Acts 18 to 21, he traveled from Antioch to Phrygia to Galatia for the third time. He then traveled back to Ephesus, where he stayed 2.25 years. So that's 27 months. After the Ephesian ministry, he sailed to Macedonia, went by foot to Greece, including a second stop at Corinth. He then went back to Macedonia, stopping at Philippi, and set sail for Troas. From Troas, he sailed for Jerusalem, stopping on the way Assos, Mytilene, Chios, Samos, Miletus, Ephesus, that is, Kos and Rhodes and Patara, Tyre and Ptolemais, and Caesarea. He was arrested and imprisoned in Caesarea, Acts 21, Acts chapter 26. He was arrested in Jerusalem shortly after arriving from his third missionary and taken to Caesarea, where he was imprisoned for two years. Now, when you stop and look at his work, we're looking at the life and the work of a preacher. What did Paul do during those times? I mean, he did stay at places and he preached there regularly, as again, going back to Corinth and Ephesus and other places, he spent a lot of time. But we would find that we would not actually, most people don't look upon him as what we call a located preacher. But you can see that he did do that of evangelistic work, but he did do local work at Corinth and at that of Ephesus. And not only that, when he left, Timothy came. And Timothy he was told to do the work of an evangelist. Now, why would he tell him to do that? So it's interesting. Then his trip to Rome, Acts 27:28, he left Caesarea, sailed to Sidon, Myra, Fair Havens on Crete, where he stayed until after the Day of Atonement. He then sailed west until shipwreck on Malta, where he stayed 3 months. And when spring came, he sailed to Syracuse. That's not New York now. Rhine and Putelia finally arrived in Rome, where he was in prison for 2 more years. And so that's 4 years. Paul's movement around the Roman Empire. Paul was apparently freed after the Roman imprisonment. There is biblical and early church history evidence, and that Paul was released and traveled more, including a trip to Spain, according to Clement of Rome in First Clement and Second Timothy. At some point, he returned to Rome, where he was martyred in the summer of 64. So he didn't give up his evangelistic work, but he didn't stay in place after getting out of prison. He didn't stay in a long place at a long time. So we have the example there that yes, he did do local work, but he did to me, he did more evangelistic work, traveling and so forth. And so, but there are at least 4 basic pitfalls of attitude to avoid. Number 1, avoid having a definite length of time in your mind. When you go to a place, you go there to do the Lord's work. You mark this down and forget it not. If a preacher thinks that a set number of years on a given job is his limit, usually that conception alone will stifle, smother, and prevent growth. Well, I've been here 6 months. I ain't got but 18 more months to go. Or I've been here, 12 months. It's something that we've had missionaries to come to us, and one was a young man and his wife. And they weren't really going there to preach. I mean, he was going to preach, but that wasn't the reason he was going. He was going there to help them get water. And he was going to stay there 5 years. He's going to show them how to grow crops and all that kind of stuff. He went there agriculturally. Is the way I looked at it. They had their own, I don't know what it was. I want to say chickens. Yeah, chickens. I think they had their own chickens and eggs and so forth. And he came back and said, he said, well, we were just going to stay 5 years, but we're digging this well. And when we get this well dug, we're going to let the community use it too, So, hey, the Church of Christ is allowing us to get water. We don't have to go way off to get water. And so he stayed longer. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he came home here a couple of years ago. But avoid the extreme notion of, if one is against me, I will leave, because you're going to have one. You're going to have at least one person that's going to be against it. There's always going to be one. I won't say always, but the places that you try out, sometimes there'll be one you can, when you're in there talking to the men or to the elders, you'll find one that just kind of, I don't say he doesn't like you, he just maybe doesn't want you to come. I went to a place and tried out, and then it was nice. It was a downtown congregation, and there's 3 elders, and one of them was sick. He was the elder. He was the elder. Well, we can't really make a decision because brother so and so is not here. He's sick, and so forth. Didn't come to Bible study. Didn't come to worship. Then we had the meeting. He came. Well, we can't just make a decision right now, like that and so forth. And so you have something like that. But there will be some after you go to a place that some of them that maybe they don't like your style of preaching or whatever it may be. But remember, you're doing the Lord's work. And I wonder sometimes about people's attitudes toward a preacher when he's doing the best he can to see the church grow and see all to those spiritual things, and yet some people want him to go because he's trying to teach them spiritual things. But on the other hand, steer clear of the extreme if they can't run me off. Okay? They're not going to run me off. I've heard members say that. I've never heard a preacher say that. Now, some people may have, but I haven't. Avoid taking a job just long enough to get something better financially. Okay? There are going to come better positions. I was working at one congregation, and I moved from that congregation. They was paying me well. I mean, I couldn't complain at all. And I moved to another congregation. I'm making a little bit more money, but the cost of living, my wife had to go to work. We couldn't make it with the salary. But then within about 90 days, they gave me the biggest raise that I'd ever got preaching until I moved to Carson. So a congregation that you love and you show that love, and the congregation shows their love for you, they're going to take care of you. I mean, there are members of the church here that ask our preacher and his family, are you being taken care of? Are you well cared of? Do you need anything? And so you'll have people that like that. Okay, anything on that? Stay as long as you can. Yeah. Working too far from the elders and the deacons. Now, we brought this up. I talked about the elders and so forth, and we talked about the duties and responsibilities of elders, the duties and responsibilities of the church to the elders, the duties and responsibilities of the preacher, duty and respect of the congregation to the preacher. And we're going to also talk about the development of the congregation. So that means we're going to talk about that of elders and deacons. And we probably should have done that before we got to this pitfall, but we haven't done that. And so we will do that after this lesson. So, yeah, it's after this lesson. It's working too far from the elders and the deacons. The proper way for elders, deacons, and the preachers to work together closely as a team. And that's what we are, we as a team. You, as a preacher, have a responsibility as a Christian to do personal work. But as we've already pointed out, as a preacher, you're going to probably have more freedom with your job than elders and deacons. And elders and deacons may find Bible studies for you, or they'll say, so look, this person wants to study the Bible, and I can't do it because they want to study during the daytime around 2 o'clock every day, and I don't get off of work until 5. So somebody's got to do it. And if they can't find another elder or another deacon or another member, they're going to ask the preacher to do it. And so we would find that, if you'll notice, the Apostle Paul, if you go to Acts chapter 20, verses 17 and verse 28 there, he called for those elders over there of Ephesus over to Miletus, to talk with them about the work that was going on there. And so in Acts chapter 20 there in verse 17, I don't have that verse down in my notes. It says, and from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church. And look at verse 28. There he says, I take heed therefore unto yourself and all the flock over which the Holy Ghost have made you overseers. In other words, they're elders, to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood. Now, and there are other passages like 1 Peter chapter 5 and 5 verses 1 through 4. He talks about the elders being like shepherds. Okay. And we're going to look at Ephesians 4 in just a moment. And also 1 Timothy 4 and verse 14. In the world of business, if the company does not work together, it will fail. See, here's Paul telling these elders at Ephesus. Now, he spent 2 years and a quarter there. In other words, let's see, quarter 4 and 12 is 3. So he spent 27 months there. And so he had a relationship with them. So he called them over and he just simply told them what he had found out since the time that he left, and in other places where he had been preaching and teaching the gospel, he found out these things, and he told them, even among yourself, even among you elders, somebody would draw the church away. And so they had to be a team. They had to do their work. And that's what we'll talk about more so later because of their qualifications. That is the elders' qualifications, the deacons' qualifications. We've already looked at the preacher's qualifications and so forth in reference to the things that they have to do. Now, a football team, they're a team. You notice what I put out there, and you may think of something better. My nephew, he was playing basketball, and he says, I've invited, they want me to invite you, because he talked about me. He says, they want to invite you to come up and talk to our basketball team. And I said, what do you want me to talk about? I couldn't preach to them because they wouldn't allow you to. He says, well, just a talk. you know, because of your experience as a preacher, your experience as a combat veteran, and things that you've done in life, so forth. I said, okay, well, I went up there and I preached, talked about you're a team. And what does that
Hey,
mean?
hey, hey.
Get it. He's gonna bite you on the leg. I talked about togetherness. I said, here you are, you're a basketball team. And the reason that they're having their awards and stuff, I said, the reason why you had a good season and everything, because you were together. You were a team. And I talked about togetherness. Then you edified one another. And that's what they did. They edified it or exhorted one another or encouraged one another, however you want to use the word. And I said, the attitude that you have, you had a winning attitude. Yes, we can do this. We can do this. And that motivated you. So that's what I use. But that same thing works when we stop and think about the church. We are a team of people. God has set up the government, as you want to look at it that way, or how the church is supposed to work. And therefore, we all work in there, and we all have, as the Bible points out, we all have different jobs, different offices. You have the office of the elder, office of the deacon, office of that a teacher, office of a preacher, office of an evangelist, and you had members. That's the way he puts it in Ephesians chapter 4. Let me just flip over right quick. And remember, he's telling these, then he writes this letter to them, as we read Acts chapter 20. Then he writes this letter to them and said in verse 11, he gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting, he says there, of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. So that was the whole purpose of having this work together. They're working together. They are a team. We are a team. And in the military, Jim knows this as well as others, like not only sports, but even in the military, we had a squad. Now, a squad was made up of two teams. And so you had to have, everybody had to do their part. And we had some of those people didn't want to do their part, you know, and we threatened them with Article 15 or put them in jail over there in Vietnam. But the thing of it is, we were a team. So you look at a football team and, you know, they got to work together. I don't know if y'all watched football this week, but I watched that, and I was glad that Georgia won. But I watched the Florida game, and man, that fellow playing quarterback down there just is amazing. And so, and you know, but I'm an SEC fan anyway. But the business, you know, you look at the business world. If you don't work together, it's going to fall apart, and so will the church. We're not working together. You know, we'll fall apart. People will go their way. And one of the biggest problems that we have is like division within the leadership will trickle down into that of the membership. That's the reason why I came up with a thing with me. When somebody came to me and wanted to complain about a deacon or an elder, or even complain about me, you know, if they're complaining about me, I listen to what they say. But if they were complaining about somebody else, I said, "Why don't you go talk to that person? Don't talk to me. I'm not going to go talk to them for you. You know, you go talk to them. You know, they're your brother, they're your sister in Christ. Well, they hurt my feelings. Well, you need to go talk to them. Well, we can't get them to do it. They say they're going to do it. They don't do it. So you need to talk to them. Don't talk to me about it." And so, but it will. If you have division in the leadership, you know, I've seen that happen. But I want to tell you this now, because it comes to my mind. I encouraged a fellow who was an elder one time. He wanted to resign because he was gone along. He was a tax man for the state of Alabama, living in the state of Georgia, traveling all over the East Coast. And he was going to resign. And I pleaded with him not to do it. He was a good man. And so he said, okay, he wouldn't. For the next 3 months, I watched a man who was miserable. And he came to me, talked to me again. I said, "Jim, you do what's best for you." Because he was miserable, because he was gone. He wasn't able to go to the meetings and stuff like that. It wasn't all the time, but you know, he'd be gone and they'd have a meeting. He wasn't there. He says, I'm not a shepherd. You know, I'm not here with the sheep. And so, you know, he resigned. He became a deacon. He resigned and became a deacon. And he was a treasurer, I think. We've done something of it anyway. Always work to be done. Sometimes a preacher tries to work away from the elders, and sometimes the elders are cold toward a preacher. They don't care whether you work with them or not. I always thought it was good, when I became a member of the church, we didn't have elders, so all the men got together and we had all the work done. You know, we had committees and all that kind of stuff. And even when I went to school, they didn't have elders. Even when I was preaching around here, I didn't go to any congregation that had elders. I moved from there to Aliceville. The elders just resigned. I moved from there to Leeds. They had elders. They had 3 elders, and two of them worked, and the other one, he was there for the meetings, but first, I don't know about his visiting ways and stuff like that. But then I moved there to another congregation where the elders had resigned, or was asked to resign by the membership, and they did. Both of them left. Both of the elders left, went somewhere else, and then I moved down to Alabama, and we had 2 elders there, and we appointed 2 others eventually. And then I went to Conyers, and they had 4 or 5. And at Thunder Carson, they had 3, and one of them had resigned, and he left too after I got here. And so then now we have 3 elders, 3 good elders. And so, so you got to work with them. We have to work with the elders because they're over the church. And not only that, you have deacons, they're responsible for some work. And so here's, the preacher has got to work with them. And, if there's a problem, then the only thing I know to do is talk to them and says, look, I'm trying to do my work. And, I don't feel like I'm getting my support from you. And, or if you're helping a deacon do something other, and, I keep asking you what you want me to do. And, you won't give me anything to do. You do it all yourself, like that type of thing. So, but the thing of it is, elders and preachers work, elders and the preacher work too. Take counsel with each other, and the preacher must not have the attitude, I do not need you. I liked my work. I met with the elders. When they met, I met with them. When I became an elder and then the preacher, I met with them. But when they decided anything about me, I did not attend. My job, raise, vacation, or whatever, I did not attend. And so, but the thing of it is that we work together. And to work together that way, the elders, the deacons, and the preachers need to get together. And I hope that we will do more of that here at Cartersville. I'll be able, I'm a deacon, and so I'll be able to do more when in April, when I really retire. So may the God of heaven help us to have more big men and fewer peanuts in the pulpit and in the eldership and in the deaconship. In other words, we want big men, people that's going to stand up for what's right, and people that's going to work, people going to do the work that they said they would do. Now, as a young preacher, I jumped ahead. Someday you may unfortunately find yourself in a situation where you feel the necessity of helping the church to clean out a corrupt portion of its leadership. And that is hard. I had a man that was an elder, and he had no children that were members of the church. I had to ask him to resign. And we'd already appointed, when I got there, it was 2 of them, and he was one of them. And we appointed another one. And then when we got that settled, then I asked him, I told him, I said, you don't fit the qualification. Now, he did the work of an elder. I'll be honest with you. He did the work better than the one that was with him when there was only 2. He did the work, but he didn't fit the qualification. And he continued to do the work after that. But he's upset with me to begin with, but then eventually he told me, he says, you did the right thing. I said, I really appreciate it now. He told the whole congregation, that. So sometimes that happens. And you need to be very, very careful in doing this, because the majority of the time, once that's settled, you're gone. Okay? Especially if there's anybody in the congregation, in leadership, that were using you to get rid of this person in the leadership. Pray God that such will not be your lot, that you never get in a situation like that. And when there is a situation like that, they're having problems within the eldership, your best bet is do your job. That's what I always did. I would do my job no matter what the leadership was doing. If I disagreed with them, I would tell them I disagreed with them, but I would do my work, because, you got people sitting in the pew that want to go to heaven, and therefore you're going to preach and teach the truth, and you do your job. It says, as a young preacher, do not take a job where reform is needed. It is best to allow an older preacher to come and help them solve the problem. Brother Martin, see, this is something I learned about Brother Martin. Brother Martin did that. That's what he did. He went around and helped congregations that were having problems. And when I moved my first located work, I got there. If I'm not mistaken, I got there, and they'd already hired me when I got there. The elders had already resigned. So there are situations where your sense of humor, your decency, and loyalty will not allow you to run. You know, you're not going to leave. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to help them. I'm going to help them get over this, and so forth. Sometimes we're that way. Some have helped the church to reform and then left. Said that, you need somebody new. Sometimes those who use you to help reform will turn against you when they no longer need you. Working too far from the elders and deacons. Number 5, my counsel to you is to, as it says there, to do your duty as you see it. Take life as it comes. Don't get the idea that it is up to you to save the church alone. Don't get the crusader complex. I think this is in the book, but don't run from the clear call of duty. Know that you lead a church out of the swamp of stagnant filth on the high, dry ground. You have done the cause of Christ a service. Regardless of what rewards you obtain in this life, leave the rewards to God in eternity, and don't worry. That's not in the book. I don't remember it being in the book. That's all. I'm sitting here trying to think, where did I get that? I got that for some preacher, I think, but I didn't put it down. But you see that, I mean, that's the counsel I would give any preacher. Do your job, do what and take life as it comes. And you solve the problems if you can. If you got good elders and good deacons, they're going to solve the problem eventually. And some of them may leave. Sometimes you'll have an eldership that will tell you, look, we got some, they'll call you in and set you down and say, look, we got some problems. And you may know of the problems, but we don't want you to get involved in these problems because we as elders are going to handle the problem. And that's what they do. They handle it. We had that problem here, and the elders handled it. Myself as a former preacher and Corey as the preacher did not get involved in it. He's still here, and so am I. They didn't run both of us off. Okay, number 6, there will always be those who love you and will always be your friend. Always. After all, your own self-respect must be kept in review. Respect yourself. Always. And so take the warnings on both sides of this question and figure out your course of action in line with what you conceive to be the clear call of duty. Remember, you're called to preach the gospel, and that's what you're to do. And finally of all, always pray. Number 16, got to hurry because this is in Jason's test. Financial debt seems to be one of the most devastating plagues to preachers, and for at least 4 reasons. Number 1, it is sometimes difficult to draw the line between sincere but poor management of one hand and willful indifference to bills on the other. When you're picking up what it's going to take for you to live as a preacher at any place, you figure that up and then turn right around and say, okay, I want to save this amount of money every time I get paid. And when you open up your checking account, open up a savings account. And if you're going to save $25 a week, then you get your first check, you put $25 in there. There will be eldership, like here in Carsville, that they told me they were going to give me a raise and they wanted me to set myself up a retirement account. And that was great advice to me. And so, and I appreciate it very much because that's what I did in many ways, that I did that. They paid me and I kept up with everything. It's sometimes difficult to call a difference between a line of that. Let me go on. Don't spend so much time. The exacting demands of the public also makes it easy to contract too much debt. And today, just about now, you go to Walmart, you can't even pay cash. They want a credit card, and you get a credit card. I don't matter if you're going bankrupt 15 times. They'll give you a credit card. The training and natural desire of a preacher to be liberal with his money and the Lord's work combined to make financial debt just around the corner. Now, most of the time when you go take a job, the congregation, I try to be an example in giving. So I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna figure out what they're gonna pay me, and I'm gonna give a certain amount of that. So when I do my budget, you know, what I will take you to hire me, this is what it's gonna take, because I'm gonna know exactly how much I'm gonna give, and then I know exactly how much I'm gonna save every month. You know, at least every month, every week, whenever you got paid, and so forth. You put that in there. And remember, you got to have insurance too. Okay, in view of damage that this special pitfall does, let us notice warning signs. There is the ease with which debt can be contracted in these days. There is the possibility of taking a job at insufficient pay because of a desire to help a church in need. If you do that, you need to ask this question to them. May I go outside the congregation and find me more support if I come and take this job? And if they say no, I would give you the advice, don't take the job. There is a sign of poor management. You have to learn how to manage your money. There is a warning sign applicable to all true preachers of the gospel. We are thinking more of spiritual matters than material one. You know, our mind is on the spiritual things. Linda does, she messes with all of our physical things. You know, her father said Bobby will give everything away if you leave it up to him. So handling the controversial matters, and we've covered this in some ways, but let's go quickly. In the first place, be certain of your convictions. You know what you believe. You know what the Bible says. Be certain. He that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words, have one to judge him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. Just remember that. This is what I know, and therefore I know what I believe. Ephesians 6:13, wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. In the second place, respect the conviction of others. Now, even though you disagree, you respect them and try to teach. If it's wrong, if it's a wrong position, you try to teach them, but you respect, at least they believe something. In the second place, respect the conviction of others. Let's put that there twice. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Thirdly, do not fear to tell your conviction, for we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard, Acts 4 and verse 20. And an example of it, Exodus 32, what did Aaron do? He had convictions to follow what Moses and God had said, but he gave in. He didn't tell them their convictions. Brother Meyer says this in the book. He says, I am not conscious of having preached regularly at any place where I do not apply these three principles on this question, cardinal warfare, of knowing my convictions, holding to those convictions, expressing those convictions. Now, that's what he owes. He don't believe that a Christian can go to cardinal warfare. That's his personal thing. It's a personal belief. He wouldn't go. I had a good friend. I had one of my instructors. He felt the same way. He would not go in carnal warfare, but he said he'd work out an ammunition dump making the ammunition. He said, now you can say I'm inconsistent, but I'm inconsistent. I am not going to go fight. You know, that's his conviction. Conclusion. The preacher needs at all times to be careful of these pitfalls. Pitfalls can hurt the church and the preacher. We went 4 minutes over. September the 13th, 2022. I'll be up in the mountains, but we will have class, okay? Congregational and leadership relationships, chapters 11, 12, and 13 of the required text. And when you read that text, now you're going to find that it's dealing with some things like visitation and things of that sort. We have a class on that, okay? So that would give you time to outline that. Any questions? I'll send you the notes tonight. And I'll send you, Jim, you want to take the test? You make 100? I'd make 100. All right, anything?
No,
Any
sir.
questions? Any questions there, Jason?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, you let me know what Paul says.
Okay.
All right.